The protests breaking out all around Iran are inspirational on so many different levels, and there is a long and vibrant history of women's struggle and resistance all across the region that the world needs to know about. The situation in Iran right now and what sparked the protests was the brutal murder of 22-year-old Kurdish woman Jina Amini. Jina was arrested on the 13th of September by the morality police because she was supposedly not wearing her headscarf in a correct way. On the 16th of September, she died as a result of torture and beatings by the morality police. The funeral essentially turned into a protest, and these protests and uprisings very quickly spread into other parts of Iran, and the slogan Jin Jian Azadi, women, life, freedom, was chanted all around the world by celebrities cutting bits of their hair off.
Jin Jian Azadi, women, life, freedom.
This slogan comes from radical roots. It comes from an anti-colonial, anti-capitalist struggle that is not just in Iran, but spread all across the region. This slogan was chanted in the fight against Daesh, the so-called Islamic State, in the fight and resistance against Turkish invasions of northern Syria, and it was first chanted on the 8th of March 2006 in Istanbul as a slogan for the Kurdish women's movement and the Kurdish women's liberation struggle in Turkey, but also for all across the region, whether you're in Syria or in Turkey or in Iran. Being a Kurdish woman adds many layers to the oppression and the suppression that you face. Jina Amini, who has been broadly referred to as Mahsa Amini, is only formally called Mahsa Amini because Kurdish people in Iran are not able to name their children with their own Kurdish names. So Jina Amini was referred to as Jina by her family, by her friends, and was only called Mahsa to the Iranian state because she was not allowed to have her own name. If you are Kurdish, you're just assumed to not be able to have power, not be able to have a voice, and therefore what would happen to you will just go unnoticed. I can only imagine that the morality police who stopped Jina just assumed we can do and treat her in any way we like and no one will bat an eyelid. This is the universal experience of Kurds all across the region. 100 years ago, during the fall of the Ottoman Empire, the Kurdish people were divided into 4 nation states: Turkey, Syria, Iraq and Iran. And since then, the experience of Kurdish people has been a universal one wherever they are. Whether it's their language being denied, existence being denied, no political recognition. What we see in Iran today is the uprising of a people who have been oppressed and suppressed and simply denied for 100 years. The history of Iran is very connected to the history of the Middle East as a whole, very deeply intertwined with the development of international capitalism. In 1953, the democratically elected Mohammad Mossadegh, the Prime Minister of Iran at the time, was overthrown as a result of Western intervention because he tried to nationalize Iran's oil. The Shah, which means the king, so a monarchy, was installed in Iran, supported by the West. That period was a very difficult period for all peoples of Iran. The Shah ruled Iran for over 20 years before the 1979 revolution. After 1979, there was a moment and time of hope in Iran that things could get better. The section that won the Iranian Revolution at the time was one of the most fundamentalist sections of the Iranian Revolution. That was also as a result of Western intervention. Western intelligence agencies would hand over names to these fundamentalist sections to arrest leftists and to arrest sections of society who were pushing for a different Iran. At some point in history, the West decided that it was the official protector and defender of women all around the world, supposedly saving the women in Afghanistan, in Iran as well. But the truth is that the West has supported some of the most fundamentalist, patriarchal, anti-women sections in the world. States like Saudi Arabia, with its atrocious levels of human rights abuses, its treatment of women, its war in Yemen, which is directly supported by the West. Western states have very strong relationships with states like Turkey, which is the largest jailer of journalists worldwide, and that is using chemical weapons against the defender of women's liberation in the Middle East, the Kurdish women's freedom movement. The Iranian regime should be deeply condemned, but we need consistency in this. One of the most interesting and in some ways almost comical declarations of solidarity we saw was the Christian Democratic Union in Germany declaring its support for Xinjiang Azadi, declaring support for Iranian women. But the Christian Democratic Union, as well as the entire German government, criminalizes the Kurdish women's freedom movement in Germany. But for some reason, Xinjiang Azadi they think is a friendly way because it's Iran, and Iran is this backwards fundamentalist place that is safe to save women. But when women are saving themselves, when they are defending themselves, whether that's against the Turkish state, whether that's against Daesh, the so-called Islamic State, this is not acceptable. The West can save women, but when women are saving themselves, they criminalize it and they also condemn that too. It's crucial to remember that people are at the heart of what's happening in Iran right now. The protests, the uprising, brave women and men in universities, in schools, on the streets, in villages, in towns, in cities are rising up for their freedom. So it's very important that we stay in tune with the people in Iran, but also the Kurdish people all across the region as well, so we don't become pawns in a Western strategy for what a future Middle East could look like. So we determine our own struggle and we determine together as the people of the region what a future Middle East could look like. It's important to support alternative media that goes beyond the headlines and shows us alternative perspectives and gives us insights into histories that are often ignored by mainstream media. So please support Double Down News on Patreon.